Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's show, right? And we are going to be talking about why and how emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs win in business. With me here today is a great, happy leader in the person of Melissa Maloney. Please, over to you. Introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Maloney. I am the co-founder and executive director of AWL Partners and All Women Lead. Super excited to be here and to have this conversation with everybody.
Awesome. Okay, so for those that are watching, I have a couple of questions that I've arranged to discuss this topic with Melissa. And first of course, we'll get to know more about her brand and what she does. And as we continue to have the conversation, if any question comes to your mind, feel free to drop it as a comment. We're going to see it. I'll pick the question and ask her towards the end of the conversation. And if you're watching this as a replay or listening to it as a replay, there's no problem there. You can listen to the end and see the questions that other people asked and the answer that she gave. So back to you, Melissa. Could you take us back to the moment where you realized that the corporate world needed a new kind of leadership? What was happening at that time?
Yeah, it's funny because I've started to share this story a little bit more in the last little while, just around sort of my own leadership journey. I started managing my first team when I was 21, and I worked for an incredible organization, but it was an organization that led at the time, not as much now, but led at the time with a lot of authority, and it was pretty aggressive. And I was like, I don't fit into this. And so and I would say at that point I was probably too much of a cheerleader, but I was a bit of a cheerleader. I was like, you can do it, like everyone do great, and really just wanted people to succeed.
Mhm.
And I think I was like that because that's what I was like. I was the person who would never fail. So I just assumed, everybody would never fail. And then I learned that's not true either. So I started to kind of pay attention to read and to learn and to try and build out, like, what would my leadership style look like. And I really learned that I didn't have to choose between getting results and still being a kind and caring leader. And so that's when I really started to realize you can have both things. And at the time, I didn't have a name for it. I just kind of thought I was putting together these pieces of different people's leadership that I liked.
Mhm.
But then when I started to learn about emotional intelligence, I realized, oh, that's what this is. This is being an emotionally intelligent leader and leading in a different way, that we don't have to lead in what I now would say is the old school authoritarian way. We can get results and be caring. Both
Mm.
things can exist.
Awesome. Of course, we're going to dive more into that. But for now, let me ask you, what's the difference? Because I saw that you have like two brands, the All Women
Yes,
Lead and the AWL Partners. What's the distinction between the two?
definitely. So my business partner, Jen Slay, and I started All Women Lead in 2019. And that was our brand up until this year. Um, but it's still a product of our new brand. So All Women Lead is the gender equity side of the work that we do. So we host events, and we have ultimately an employee resource group solution where we help support women's employee resource groups with training and sessions that we deliver and organize speakers to deliver, all focused on women's empowerment at work and women's leadership at work. However, when the business continued to grow and we started to expand and we're serving organizations on a greater level, we knew we couldn't just be All Women Lead because we were also working with men. And so that was when we transitioned into AWL Partners. So ultimately, we operate as AWL Partners with All Women Lead as a part of that business. But because the All Women Lead brand was strong and people knew it, we don't want it to go away completely because it still connects people to us, and as we continue to grow AWL Partners.
I see.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for
no problem.
clarifying. So, what's the core mission of AWL Partners?
So, our mission is to help make individuals and businesses emotionally smart so that they can focus on getting better results.
Mm, good.
Yeah. So ultimately, what we mean by that is through all the different ways that we serve, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit too,
Mhm.
through all the different ways that we serve, everything we do is rooted in emotional intelligence. So whether we are working with somebody one-to-one, whether we're working with a team, whether we're doing training, everything is based in that foundation of emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
because we believe that if we can help people understand how they use their emotions to
Mhm.
make decisions, to problem solve, to communicate, to act on a daily basis, that if people understand how they use their emotions, they won't be the thing that gets in their way of them being able to perform and get the results, whether it in their personal life or in their work life that they're trying to achieve. So it's really about how we use our emotions.
Mhm.
That's sort of how we position emotional intelligence. So looking at it from, well, if say we're doing an EDI training, and working with people on their equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, if we're doing that, the foundation is that emotional intelligence. How do we build empathy? How do we build trust? How do we build these skills that are so critical in order for people to be able to care about their interpersonal relationships, to be empathetic in them, to be assertive if they're acting as an ally? How do we use those emotional intelligence skills to leverage that topic? But we would also have that same conversation with somebody if, say we're coaching with them and we're working with them, say I'm doing sales coaching with them and I'm working with them as a salesperson, to
Mhm.
say, great, how are you using your assertiveness to overcome objections? Or how are you using your empathy to be curious and understand your client's needs? We're still basing it in that emotional intelligence, even though the skill that we're trying to drive might be different, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So, like, who does AWS serve in the sense that is it like entrepreneurs only or business leaders or what kind of people?
So we have ultimately two lines of our business. So we have individuals. So in the individual realm, we work with ultimately anybody. Um, for the most part, on the individual side, it's women. So we have coaching. So we would work with entrepreneurs, we would work with salespeople, we would work with business leaders, all on the coaching side of things. But we also have counseling. So we have a team of licensed therapists who work. So we kind of separate it on the counseling and the coaching side, but we also have masterminds. We have the all women lead events.
Mhm.
We have sort of that side for individuals, and then we have the organization side. And with the organizations, we're focusing on team building, communication, EDI, leadership development, strategy, change management, sort of all of those operational things. And then the other piece to that would be so we do workshops, we do training, we do speaking engagements, all sort of for business or for groups. And then we have the our all women lead side of that serves both sides. Really is about, we have a hub of resources to help to create more empowerment for women in the workplace. We host events, all geared towards supporting women in the workplace, and sometimes that is entrepreneurs at the same time, because they have workplaces too. So
Sure.
it's a little bit of it's more about the intention, less about the who, because we probably can serve almost anybody with the work that we're doing.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I can understand that because emotional intelligence cut across, many departments.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Like leaders need it, but so do salespeople. So does human resources. Like
Mhm.
it really is. I taught a group of students last week, so it really is for anybody. And so we're not necessarily industry specific. We're much more about who wants to create a different type of work environment, and then we can figure out a way to serve.
Mm. I get it. Many founders create what they once needed. So, what personal or professional pain point did AWL partners help you solve for yourself?
I think for both Jen and I, we have a few sort of lenses that we look at the work that we do because we started as All Women Lead. That really was the heart of what we did, and I will say it was Jen's idea. She called me and said, "Hey, we should do something together. Let's have lunch." And so, okay. And so we went out for lunch, and it was when empathy at work was becoming the bigger conversation. Like empathy in the workplace was becoming a bigger thing. We were both trained in emotional intelligence, and we saw this opportunity where we're like, well, there's no proof that women are more emotionally intelligent than men. That's not a thing. But women have always been allowed to use their emotions more frequently than men. And so we were like, this is an opportunity for women to lean into this, into leadership in this way. What we did see as a gap for ourselves, though, was we wanted a women's event that wasn't and it's funny because I'm wearing pink today. I said, I don't want a pink event. I don't want it pink. I don't want to do yoga. Like I'd always seen these women's events that were geared and positioned as leadership events, but to me they were very fluffy. And I'm like, I'm a type A executive. Like that wasn't what I was looking for. I'm like, no, I want to go talk about the real stuff. I want to have the conversation about how hard it is to balance my kids and work. I want to talk about the fact that I have other moms judging me because I'm not at every sporting event, even though my kid's dad was at everything. So why do we both need to be there? Like we wanted to have those conversations. And so that was really what it started from, was this belief that we wanted to create a space where hard conversations could happen and where it was real. And we saw that as an opportunity to sort of build a space for women. And so that's how it began. And then it happened so easily. The first session sold out so fast and with no effort. And so we were like, I said to Jen, I can remember so clearly saying to her, we're on to something here because this is too easy. It shouldn't be this easy. And so then we just continued. We continued from there. And so we hosted 4 sessions on emotional intelligence, lunch and learns, just little guys, and then leading up to an all-day women's conference. And that women's conference was March 11th, 2020. And so then was wonderful timing. And so then not long after that, the next day, the world shut down for COVID, and it was not the right time to be in the event business. So we made some quick changes, but we were one of the groups that ended up benefiting from it, because what would have been local in-person events quickly transitioned to online events, which meant our community didn't need to be just in town. We could do stuff everywhere.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story. Okay. So now let's transition more into like the discussing emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So why is emotional intelligence no longer a soft skill but a necessity for entrepreneurs?
I feel like it always was. I think we just can talk about it more now. And we've got words for it now. Like, I think if we think back to the people who have always been really successful entrepreneurs, I'm going to guess they've always had great stress tolerance, because if they didn't have good stress tolerance, they probably would have given up at some point. We sometimes talk about in entrepreneurship, like impulse control, where we actually say a lot of entrepreneurs don't use their impulse control a lot, but that's a good thing, because if they used impulse control all the time, they would never make decisions. They'd never start. They wouldn't move, right? Like, entrepreneurs try new things. And so I think it's always been there. We just actually now have words for it, and we can actually get people to start to consider and use it in a different way, so that we can talk about it differently now. And the science of it is, in the world of science, is relatively new, but I actually think it's always been there. We're just actually talking about it now. But that said, I think we are at a point now in terms of, with technology and with the generations that are in the workforce, with all of those pieces, that we're now at a time where if we don't use it, we are probably going to be left behind. Because to me, I look at it from sales. If I can buy it online, why would I buy with a person? Well, I'm going to buy with a person if I have a relationship. I'm going to buy with a person if they understand me in a different way, if they make it easier for me, if they help me with things. That's all emotional intelligence that I can't get out of AI or out of a computer. If I'm leading people, I need to be using it now, because especially the younger generations coming into the workforce, they have a different expectation of work. They are not putting up with stuff, and I'm proud of them. And my kids are in that age group, and I joke with my friends all the time. I'm like, they're smarter than us. Like they figured this out. Like I'm not going to put them down. I did the 100-hour weeks for a lot of years, and I think these kids are smarter than us. So I just think it's different now, but I don't necessarily think it. I think we have words for it, and I think the expectation is now there that we use it.
I see. So what's the cost of ignoring emotional intelligence in leadership?
I really think it's the thing that sets people apart from an employee engagement standpoint. I used to teach a model. I don't teach it as much anymore, but I had a model that I used to teach called Everybody Wins. And the whole concept behind this model was that if we treated our team well, that our team would treat our customer well. And if we treated our customers, if we did both those things, that we would our bottom line would happen on its own. And I really do believe that's the world that we're in right now, that people I don't need to work in the city I live in anymore. I can work around the world. So if we're not treating people well, which is typically done through emotional intelligence skills, then they don't have to work at the office down the street. They can work anywhere. If I don't treat my customers well, they don't have to buy from me anymore. They can buy from anywhere. So in the world that we're in, it's going to be the piece that sets us apart, and it's going to cost staff, it's going to cost revenue, it's going to cost customer loyalty. It's going to cost those things, which will turn into a bottom line issue, and it in both ways, on the negative, but also on the positive. Like if we ramp these things up, it's going to turn into a huge opportunity as well.
Well,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had an extra thought. And I also think, and I think we're going to talk more about this too. I also think from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's also the act of resiliency. We're in a world right now that is changing so fast all the time. And those emotional intelligence skills are the things that will help you survive it. Right? The stress tolerance, the understanding how you use your emotions in those moments. Those are the things that will come into play for the entrepreneurs, especially. I've spoken to a lot of business owners in the last couple months, and they're scared. We're seeing business owners pull away from business now. And those are the things where it's understanding, how do I keep myself in a good place in these turbulent times and busy times and chaotic times, and emotional intelligence can help with that.
The question on my mind now is, for someone that is listening, since that we've been talking about emotional intelligence is going to be like, what is emotional intelligence?
What is it? Yes.
So that's the question.
Yeah. So there's a few different models of emotional intelligence. The one that I focus on, there's kind of two main schools of thought. They're the same thing. They're just worded a little bit differently. The one that I focus on is the EQI model, which we have 5 large composites that are sort of the big composites. So it's emotional awareness, emotional expression, interpersonal relationships, decision making, and then stress tolerance. Are sort of fit into those big ones. And then there's little subscales that fit underneath. So those are things like emotional, like your actual emotional awareness, your how do you communicate your emotions? How do you assertiveness, empathy, all the decision making, flexibility, problem solving, like they kind of all fit in there. But the easy model, or the simplified model, is that it's your self-awareness. So it's your own awareness of how do you use your own emotions, your self-management, how do you manage those emotions once you're aware of them, and then your relationship understanding. So how do you understand the emotions of others? And then your social management or relationship management. So how do I use the emotions, my own emotions and the emotions of others, to manage those relationships? So that's kind of the simplified way. So, and we look at it as usage, not good and bad, because it's not about good and bad. It really is about when do I use them? How often do I use them? If we think about something like problem solving, people think, oh, I'm a good problem solver, which you might be. But in the emotional intelligence realm, it's asking yourself, if my emotions are high, if something is causing me to feel stressed out, overwhelmed, or those things, how do I then solve problems in that moment? So I'm the big person. I like to throw myself under the bus a lot of the time. And so for me, if I'm really stressed out and I'm really overwhelmed, I don't actually problem solve well. I problem solve well on a normal day when things are cool. But the second that my stuff starts to really overwhelm me, all of a sudden I look at all the stuff and I just want to shut down. I don't problem solve well when my emotions are high. And so for me, it's understanding that. And since I do understand that, one, I'm not going to make big decisions in those moments because it's probably might not make the right one. But then it's also trying to figure out how do I make sure that I don't get myself to that point of overwhelm, especially in a time when I have a whole bunch of decisions or problems that I might need to solve for my business. So for us, International Women's Day is one of our busiest events. So the month leading up to it is crazy for us. So I have to really make sure all my projects are off my plate before February, so that in February I can focus on the event, and I know that I'm not going to have to juggle, because the juggling is where I can sometimes start to get overwhelmed as an entrepreneur. So it's recognizing those things and then figuring out strategies to manage them. So it's not that I just will not problem solve. It's figuring out, okay, I know this is a weakness for me or something that I don't use well. How can I do it differently for future?
That's good. Okay, so you worked in high pressure, multi-million dollar environments, right? What emotional habits separated the thriving leaders from the ones who just couldn't last?
Yeah. So I've led sales teams my entire career for the most part. And so I think sales is emotional intelligence in so many ways. It's resiliency, right? Like you think about and stress tolerance and optimism. There's a few sort of big skills that we see in emotional intelligence that sort of you can see set top performers apart, or high performing leaders apart. Assertiveness would be one, probably one of the top ones. So I look at assertiveness as a scale. We want to kind of be in the middle of the scale. We want to be assertive, but assertive can go like both ways, right? I could be passive, which isn't great, or I could be passive aggressive, which really isn't great, or I could be aggressive, or I could be abrasive. So that's where sort of I see it as a scale. So those really great leaders are assertive. They communicate well, they communicate strongly, they're not afraid to tell people how they feel, they're not afraid to tell people what they need, but they do it in a way that considers the other person still. It's not aggressive, abrasive, or passive aggressive for sure. So that would be there. Optimism would be another one. I really, my example doesn't work as well anymore. The example that I've used for years was the example I used for years was you'd never see a president who would go out and do a State of the Union address and say the world is falling, like the sky is falling, everything's bad. It doesn't work anymore because now it's happening. But but they would typically go out, say, here's what's actually happening right now. Here's what we need. Yes, it's not great. And don't worry, here's the solution. We're going to be okay. And they present with a level of optimism, not so much optimism that it feels fake or that it's not okay, that it doesn't feel real. It's reality, but it's reality with optimism and belief of the future. And then I would put stress tolerance in there as well. That ability to kind of go with the flow, have some, not have everything overwhelm you. So these are some of the things that I see consistently in top performers. Reality testing would be another one that I see a lot. And so that would be the ability to not let your emotions stand in your way of seeing things as they truly are. So if when I'm really stressed out and overwhelmed, do I start to tell myself a story about what the reality is? Or in those moments, can I still see the facts? Can I still see the path? And so those to me are some of the ones that I see, especially in results-driven environments.
That's good. So you've talked about assertiveness, being optimistic or optimism, and reality testing. The question I have about assertiveness, right? Because you talked about not being passive, not being aggressive, being in the middle. Like, what are examples of how to be in the middle?
So I would say, like, if we were to use, say an allyship conversation, or like an EDI type conversation, if with the women that we're focusing on, right? When we're saying, women who might not have their voice heard in the workplace, an assertive person, if somebody, say, cuts me off in a meeting or gives an idea that I've given 10 other times or something along those lines, an assertive person would have the courage and would be able to say, thanks so much for sharing your idea. I just want to point out that, I've actually shared that idea before and it wasn't heard. And so there's no emotion connected to it. It's just, I just want to put this on the table. It's fact, it's clear, and the assertive is the confidence to actually say it, versus an aggressive person would get angry about it and slam their fist down and say, hey, I've said that 10 times. Why don't you listen to me? Or a passive aggressive person would do the whole eye roll. It would be the eye roll. It would be the, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And like not actually say what I'm feeling. And even there's levels to assertiveness. Even being assertive enough to say it in a group, I would say, is on the really confidently assertive side. But even pulling your leader aside separately and saying, hey, just so you know, when this happens, this is how I feel. And I'd like us to start to pay attention to it, please, because I would like my ideas to be recognized as well. And that's still assertive in itself as well.
Thank you for those examples, because it will help to, clarify and, give more depth to the assertiveness.
Yeah, for sure. And it's such a key skill. Like if people were to kind of focus on one skill, the ability to communicate assertively without hurting people, it would be so powerful. And I think we could change the world probably if we just helped people have the courage to use words. I often joke and say, use your words, because I do think that it's a really powerful skill.
Okay. So for someone just stepping into entrepreneurship, how early should they start developing emotional intelligence?
It's never too early. So the cool thing about emotional intelligence is it is a skill. It's something you can develop. Um, what we know from a science point of view is that your emotional intelligence continues to develop as we age. So there is typically, the older we get, the more emotionally intelligent we get. A lot of that is just due to lived experience. We start to be able to balance things in a different way. But like I said, I ran a session with students last week, and I've run sessions with, this was university students, but I've run sessions with high school students. I think they're skills that everybody can use. But I would say, as an entrepreneur, not every, and I believe not everybody should be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. There's lots of roles, but
True.
for people who want to do this, the reality is you're taking big risks. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of challenges that you face. Like, I know now that we are responsible, now that we have employees, I'm like, I'm responsible for other people's livelihoods. Like, there's pressures that are now on us,
Mhm.
that weren't on us before, which puts that much more pressure on me.
Mhm.
And so, the emotional intelligence skills are the things that will help you through those pressure points. Because what we don't want to do is create a world where we think we're just going to outwork the pressure points. And I'm a believer in hard work, but we can't just outwork it, because we will burn out. So how do we, the emotional intelligence is what will help you find the priority setting. I try hard to avoid the word balance, because I'm not actually a big believer in life work balance, because I don't think it's a thing. I think it's a fake aspiration. Um, and so, which we could probably have a whole other call on. But I do think that that the emotional intelligence skills and understanding how we use our emotions and when they impact us will help people have the resiliency to push through. And to me, that's what makes an entrepreneur who lasts versus an entrepreneur who burns out.
Mm. Amazing. And you're talking about pressure points because for entrepreneurs, every day feels like a pressure point.
Exactly. That's it, right? Like, and so if we look at it as understanding how we use our emotions,
Mm.
it's like, if our emotions are really high, like, let's just say we've got almost no money in the bank and payroll's coming up. So now my emotions are high. If I have to go and have a meeting with a potential customer or a potential client and I'm all stressed out, am I presenting as a true, authentic person when I sit down in front of them? Probably not, because I'm
Mm.
probably going to present almost a little bit desperately, or I
Mhm.
might sell a little bit differently than I would have otherwise.
Mhm.
And what does that do for me? And I think, especially as women, I think we like comfort, we like safety a
Mhm.
little bit more. We tend to be less risk adverse. And so it's looking for, how do we create safety for ourselves and confidence for ourselves, so that when that risk adversity might come up a little bit higher, we have a safety net to fall into, so that we don't feel completely scared and uncomfortable.
So, how does emotional intelligence intersect with productivity? Like, are emotionally aware leaders actually more productive?
Um, I don't know if there's science that says they are. Um, but I think I look at it as reacting versus responding.
Mm.
And I believe people who respond are more productive than people who react. And so logically, I'm going to be more of a responder than a reactor if I'm using my emotions well.
Mm.
So that would be sort of the steps that I would take to get to. I don't have science that says it does, but those would be the steps I'd take. And so, looking at it from a productivity standpoint, if I'm a reactor, I might just like, one of the things I talk about in some of my productivity workshops is technology
Mhm.
has made us more accessible than ever before, but less available than ever before. I ask people in a workshop, how many email accounts do you have? And I get 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So we've got all these emails, we've got text messages, we've got I almost said BBM. I don't know where BlackBerry just came from in my brain. We've got text messages, we've got Messenger, we might have Snapchat if we have kids who are on Snapchat. We have all of these ways that people now reach out to us. LinkedIn messages all the time. We've got all these ways how people reach out to us. If we were to respond linearly, like if we were message response, message response, message response, message response, we would accomplish nothing. And so that to me is where, because all we do is respond to stuff. And so it's so, I think we be using the emotional intelligence to help us with how do we make decisions in a day will help us with how we're more productive in a day, and being okay with it. And it has been a hard adjustment for me. I had a zero inbox. I taught zero inbox. I had a zero inbox for probably 12 years. I have not had a zero inbox in 3 years, and I've just given up. I'm just like, no, I guess I don't reply to emails anymore. Like but for the first probably 6 months that I was failing at this zero inbox, like I had a really hard time because I was like, because it felt so wrong to me. But at the same time now, I know that if I have to prioritize, I only have so many hours in a day. I have payroll that I have to make for people. And so sometimes that means I'm not replying to you for a week, maybe for 2, or I'm saying no to meetings more often than I ever did before, because I just don't have all the time and I have to prioritize what's actually in the best interest of my business. But that took a shift in how I thought about things, which ultimately would be emotional intelligence in order to do that. So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, why do we need to do things in certain ways? Because there's probably an emotion that's driving that why.
So for someone that is listening right now,
I can see you thinking there.
And saying emotion slows me down, right? What's your response to them?
Part of me would say I totally agree. Like, I do think sometimes emotions slow us down. And I would say yes, and I would say, yeah, sometimes emotions can slow us down. Being considerate, taking the time to have the right conversation, being curious, using our empathy, that can be slower, 100%. And I would say, if we don't start to do some of those things, if we don't start to consider those things, what are the consequences on the other side? And again, we get to choose. We're in control. We get to choose what emotions we use and what emotions we don't use. And so if you're okay with the consequence, and the consequence isn't as big to you as making the fast decisions, then I'd say go for it. Make the fast decisions, as long as you're making them with intention. And for me, when it comes to whether it's emotional intelligence or productivity, I just want people to do things intentionally, not out of habit, not because it's just what I've always done, but it's, am I doing it because I realize why I'm doing it? I'm doing it with intention. I'm doing it purposefully. And as long as I'm okay with the purposefulness of it, then I actually don't know if it's necessarily bad. I'm a big believer in pace. I grew up in an organization that said speed was our greatest asset. So I am a big believer in doing things quickly, but I also am a believer in not hurting people along the way. And I do believe we can do both.
True. I was watching a movie, and someone said something. Said, I think it's a quote by one of the past popes. Says, truth is important, but I'm paraphrasing now. Truth is important, but without empathy, it's unbearable. That got me thinking. So when you talk about like not hurting people, that's really it's like you can be saying the right thing, you can be doing the right thing, but if the receiver is not going to feel good, they probably won't hear that message, you know.
Yes. And we talk a lot about intent versus impact. I may have the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it doesn't have a negative impact on somebody. And so so how do we consider both intent and impact? Because both things matter. And so and yeah, to what you were saying, I completely agree. I also will often say, just because it's in your head does not mean it needs to come out of your mouth. We live in a world now where people really feel like they should just say whatever in their head. And I'm like, we don't have to. No, we don't have to.
We don't have to
stay
do
inside.
Yeah, true. You mentioned something, because I remember I had that question, then it skipped my mind. So I went to the next question. You talked about zero inbox. I was going to ask you, what is zero inbox?
So there is a philosophy out there about having no emails in your inbox at the end of every day.
Ooh.
So the whole concept behind it is that if you picture your computer screen, anything that's not on the screen, like it's gone off the screen, it's essentially out of sight, out of mind. So the idea of zero inbox is that, so I used to teach the 4 Ds. So the idea was you only touch an email once. And so when you open it, you have to either delete it, decide when you're going to do it. So you'd put it on a task list, you'd delegate it, you'd give it to somebody else, or what did I say? Delete, decide when, delegate, or do now. So you only touch an email once, because the concept behind zero inbox was every time we open an email and reread it, we're wasting that much more time. So because it's not like we reread it once and then we know what to do the next time we open it, we have to reread it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was touch an email once and then do something with it. And if you did that, you logically at the end of every day would have an empty inbox.
I see.
And so it was a wonderful world to live in, to not have any emails. It was great. I just don't live in it anymore.
I get you now.
Yeah.
I was curious, like, zero inbox, what does that mean? So thank you for explaining.
I still cringe when I see people with like 17,282 unread. I'm like, like that causes me mass anxiety.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, just delete it. It's done. Just move on.
True. Okay, so if an entrepreneur that feels overwhelmed, what's the first emotionally intelligent step they should take?
I do think it'll depend on the person. I do think everybody is going to be different. But if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I think the first thing to do, one of the things I teach people is to do when it comes to self-awareness, is to start to do almost it's almost like a self-awareness like journal, for lack of a better way of calling it. So every day, set an alarm like 3 times a day. And when the alarm goes off, stop what you're doing and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And truly like think about your emotions, put words to it, and make a note. And then ask yourself, where do I feel it? Like, do I feel it in my chest? Do I feel it in my throat? Is my belly like, where do I feel it? Because our body does feel our feelings. And sometimes we feel it in our body before we actually realize it and have the words to express it. So then it's where do I feel it? And then if you do this a few times a day, you'll start to see the trends. And then the hope would be you notice things before you get to the point of overwhelm. And that would be sort of emotional awareness, emotional self-awareness, and recognizing like, what am I feeling? And I'm always open and honest with people. This is not a strength of mine. For the longest time, I like when I first heard, I was like, people think about how things make them feel. What? Like I was confused by this because I'm a doer. I just go. I don't think about how things make me feel. I just go. So I had to teach this to myself. And I still joke that I need an emotion wheel because I don't have the words to explain how I feel. Like, I'm like, I have frustrated, I have overwhelmed, I've happy. Like I'm got like a handful. So it is sort of that skill set of trying to slow down enough to start to consider where am I at and why am I there, in the hopes that I don't hit that point of overwhelm and burnout.
So there's this thing that you talk about, energy blocking. Can you break it down for us?
Yes, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I've spent a lot of my time focusing on understanding energy systems. And I think part of this comes from the fact that I worked in fitness for a huge chunk of my career. And what I heard over and over and over again from people was, I don't have time. I'm tired all the time. I don't have the energy. And so, but then there'd be other people who always had the energy. And so I started to like get really curious about, why do some people have energy and some people don't? And I came across an author, his name's Marcus Buckingham, and he focuses on strengths. And so what Marcus talked about in one of his books was the fact that we needed to shift sort of the mindset around strengths and weaknesses, away from being what we're good at and what we're bad at, and into what are the things that energize us and what are the things that drain us. And so starting to understand sort of energizers versus drainers. So when I started to pay attention to this and started to realize the way that I describe it, and again, I teach this sometimes to kids and they get it. So I know adults can, is I say, if you think about something that you're spending time on, if you can sit and focus on it and not look at your phone, not get up and go to the fridge for a snack, not need to like do something else, it's probably something that gives you some level of energy. Because if you can get into flow, it probably is bringing you some energy. If it's that thing that like you dread, you feel exhausted at the end of it, it's going to drain. It's probably a weakness. It's going to drain you. And so if I start my day with that thing that drains me, I'm not going to have energy left. Or if I finish my day with that thing that drains me, now I'm going to take that lack of energy home to my kids. And is that fair? So the way that I describe it is think about riding a bike. Think about cycling. And when we're out for a bike ride, a strength is like when we go downhill. And so if we're going downhill on a bike, it's super easy, right? Like it's like no effort. It's like great. It's super with hands off the handlebars. Like we're having a great time. When we get to the bottom of the hill, there's always an uphill. Always. It's like unfair bike riding rules. And so now you start to go up the hill. But initially, the first part of that hill is actually pretty easy because I've got the energy from the strength. I've got the energy from going down. But then as I continue to go up the hill, it gets harder. And now it's like harder to push and I'm trudging along. And then I have to stand up and I'm standing and pushing. And maybe at some point I have to get off the bike and walk the bike to the top of the hill. And that's what a weakness feels like. It feels like that much effort. So what I suggest to people is to energy block, in the sense of block your time with something that fills you with energy, followed by something that doesn't, followed by something that fills you with energy, so that you're using the momentum of those things to help carry you through the tasks. But I know people who are like, I just do that at the end of the day because I hate it. Well, now you're just going home and giving your worst self to your family. Don't do that. So it's like, how can we maximize our time? I would love to say we could all live in a world where we get to do all the stuff we love all the time and never have to do something we don't like. Unfortunately, that's not usually how the world works. So I still have to submit my HST every quarter, even though I don't enjoy doing it. So I'd love to say we don't have to do all the things, but we probably do. So if we can help those sections along by blocking our time in that way with strength, weakness, it will help us to actually get through the day and be more productive, so that ideally when we're at work, we get to focus on work, and when we're at home, we get to focus on home. So that we don't feel guilty, because that's my big thing, is what do we need to do to avoid guilt? Because guilt is the draining, the drainer of all emotions. And there's no good that comes out of it.
Mm. What leads to that guilt? Is it maybe you are home and
I think a lot, especially for women, I think a lot of the time we feel guilty when we feel like we're letting people down. And so if I'm at home, I want to be focusing on my family, but I've got a project that's sitting in the back of my head that I haven't done yet. Now I'm focusing on it and I feel guilty about it. But if I'm at work and I'm worried about my kids, now I'm feeling guilty about it. There's a book called Juggling Elephants. And it kind of speaks to that concept of like, how can we actually focus on what we're supposed to be focusing on when we're supposed to be? Because again, we live in a world where we're accessible. And so that's shifted. 50 years ago, we'd just go to work and nobody would call us during the day because we were at work. But now they can call us 10 times. And then that's hard. So it's trying to figure out how do we minimize those things that cause us distraction or frustration or any of those things.
I see. You also talk about ramping up empathy. What does that look like for someone running a team or managing clients?
So the activity that I like to give to people to ramp up their empathy is to the extra hard version is that they have to role play. So you and I would be the role players, and you would be me in the conversation, and I would be the person who I have a disagreement with or who I don't agree with and don't understand. And the challenge is I have to actually now prove to you as me why I'm right. And so it forces me to have to consider the other person's perspective. It forces me to have to consider why the other person might be thinking this way. It forces me to look at things through somebody else's eyes. I don't need to agree. I just need to be able to see it from their perspective. And I think it's one of the coolest things that we can do to help teach empathy to people is to get them to consider being the other person in that situation. And it's not easy, but it's a really neat way to consider it. And I think if we can help people increase their curiosity, if we can help people just try and look at things from a different perspective, how wonderful would the world be? And I joke often that I'm like Pollyanna and that I'm really positive, but what I know through the thousands of people I've talked to over the years, through traveling and working in different countries, is that when we actually are open to learning a different way, it's a really powerful tool. And it doesn't mean I have to agree with it, but it also doesn't mean I have to be against it. Like, I just need to be open to considering it. And so the more that we can do that, the more powerful it will make me as a salesperson, as a leader, as a business strategist. Because if I only think my way, that's not going to help me gain more customers. It's that willingness to go into conversations and hear things, because it's in the unspoken words and in the unintentional side comments where we can really pull some powerful pieces that could change how we do business every day.
Amazing. Okay, so how do emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs handle feedback differently from those that how do they handle it differently from those who operate from maybe ego or fear?
I was taught really young. I was very lucky, and I was taught really early in my career, feedback is feedback. It's just information. And that I got to decide what to do with it. I had an incredible COO, and I think she said that to me when I was about 22 years old. She's like, feedback's feedback. It's just information. And so what, to me, the difference is people who can operate with self-awareness is when feedback comes in, I have the ability, if I'm self-aware, to filter out how the feedback is making me feel, and recognize that the feelings aren't necessarily just because I feel that way, which I'm totally allowed to feel. We always feel first. But just because I feel that way doesn't mean the feedback's wrong. Doesn't mean I shouldn't listen to it. And that I have the ability to say, oh, when somebody says something like that to me, that makes me nervous. That makes me uncomfortable. That makes me this. So I'm less likely to receive it. I need to give myself some time and digest it and then decide what I want to do with it. Versus if every time somebody gives me feedback, my automatic is to defend. My automatic is to say you're wrong. I don't want to hear. Like you're just the willingness to receive starts to shift. And it's just feedback. We truly can decide what we're going to do with it. And it's okay to feel, because nobody likes to be told, I don't like that, or you hurt me when you said that, or all of those things. Nobody likes those things, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't hear them.
True. Okay. So let's look at how does emotional intelligence support a more collaborative work environment?
I think in a lot of ways. So I think when we're looking at a lot of the competencies that can be developed through understanding and using our emotions more, we've got things like empathy. We've got things like assertiveness, where I communicate my emotions well. We've got even if we look at something like self-actualization, which is my desire to like learn and be better, all of those things can create an environment where we have greater levels of trust, we have greater levels of communication. And when those things happen, that's where collaboration happens. That's where innovation happens. That's where those really cool things in a workplace happen. If I'm operating from a state of fear, or if I don't have high confidence and I'm operating from a lack of confidence point of view, or I'm not considering how things impact other people, it just changes the dynamic, and we're not going to have collaboration in that same way. So it really is about what we would in old school ways called team building. It's team building, but we build teams because teams are built around trust. Teams are built around the ability to confidently communicate, where they're built around psychological safety. I know that I can bring my true self to work and be accepted. And those things all come from things like self-awareness, self-expression, assertiveness, social responsibility. All of those things are all emotional intelligence competencies. And so they all connect into it.
I get it. One word that we've used often is empathy in the course of the conversation. Again, I love to define things. So what is empathy? Your own opinion.
Empathy, I look at empathy is the willingness to understand somebody else's point of view. I don't need to agree with it. I just need to be, I need to be open to understanding it and being open to learning it. So to me, empathy is, if somebody says, I don't like it when you do this, it's the willingness to go, okay, help me understand that more. Like in the willingness to go, oh, okay, well, they don't like it that way. That's okay. And even if it's how, like, feedback is one of those things, right? I often talk to leaders about how do you communicate with your team? Because if I'm a leader who communicates the same way with every single person on my team, I'm probably going to hit some roadblocks. My role as a leader, in my opinion, my role as a leader is to understand this person needs me to communicate this way. This person needs me to communicate that way. This person needs me to communicate a whole other way. And it's my role as a leader to change my communication style. That's empathy. Because I'm understanding this is how they're going to take my feedback best, or this is how they're going to take my direction best. And that's empathy. It's understanding another person's point of view, even if none of them actually align with how I want feedback or how I want to give it. I believe as a leader, it's our role to change and change to our team.
The question on my mind now is, wouldn't that be seen wouldn't that be seen as like maybe favoritism, like based on the idea that now is like you have treated people differently, right? Like, oh, this person is going to respond more to this and another person is going to respond more to that, and you have treated them differently. I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you make it so that it doesn't appear that way or it's not perceived that way?
I kind of look at it as equity, right? Like it doesn't everybody, I always picture like there's a cartoon where it's people looking over the fence and somebody is on a small box and somebody's taller, so they're on a shorter box, somebody's shorter, so they're on the tallest box, and they're looking, but they can all see over the fence. And that's kind of how I look at it is, it doesn't need to be the same for everybody. We just need to create equal opportunity for everybody. And so to me, feedback and communication from a leadership style is the same way. If I'm somebody who needs time to process feedback, then as a leader, if I expect them to process it instantly, that's not fair because it's not giving them the same. I'm an extrovert. I process super fast, but somebody else who's an introvert who needs time to process, to me as a leader, my view is my job is to give them the information and book a meeting the next day so they have that time to process so we can have a good conversation. And I do truly believe that that's my role as a leader, is to adjust my style for the people on my team, which is also to me true empathy.
I get you.
Yeah.
Okay, so rounding up now, what's your vision for AWL Partners?
Our long-term goal, the sun is setting, so I'm getting shadowy. Our long-term goal is we want our training programs that we develop to be around the world. We want to create emotionally intelligent training that can be delivered in workplaces around the world by certified instructors and trainers around the world. And we are passionately working towards that and building programming all the time, and continuing to add to our team to do that. We would also love to build gender equal workplaces and workplaces where everybody feels safe to come to work every day. And that would be an amazing world to live in.
Good. Are there, like, in order to do this, are there a kind of partners that you need, like in terms of organizations to partner with? What kind of collaborators are you looking for?
We are always looking for collaborators. So we do this in a number of ways. We're always looking for speakers. So our monthly sessions that we coordinate we call our sessions Let's Get Intentional. So for those Let's Get Intentional sessions, we're not teaching. We bring in other speakers who are experts in areas that our audience has told us they want information on. So we're always looking for speakers. We have coaches and counselors across the province right now. So always looking for people in those ways. And then we also will bring in experts in certain areas for program development or for program delivery. So I'm working on a project right now that involves some areas that I'm not super great at. So I've brought in a collaborator into that project to help me with it so that we can deliver to the highest level and to a really good standard. We're very comfortable admitting what we're not the best at and finding partners who can help with that. And we also really believe in collaboration. I think that is how women in leadership will change the world of business, is through collaboration. I think we're shifting away from a competitive environment and moving towards a collaborative environment. And I believe women will be the ones who take us across the line with that type of style. So Jen and I operate from the perspective of there is always work to do. So if it means we do it in partnership, we're in.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the one question you wish that I asked you that I have not asked you yet?
Oh, it was such a good conversation. You know what we didn't talk about? We didn't talk about allies. And the fact that it is very important to us that men are involved in all the work that we do for All Women Lead. We are huge believers in allyship, and we want men at the table. We want men to be involved in the conversation, and my sort of secret goal is that our International Women's Day event gets 700-ish people. I want it, when we hit 1,000, I want it to be 500 men and 500 women. That to me says we've actually done what we're trying to do, is when we have as many men in the room understanding the value of listening to the women's voices on stage as we have women in the room listening to the women's voices on stage. That would be incredible to me.
Why is this important?
As we started to get bigger, I started to have more people say to me, I started to have men say to me, well, this is for women. You don't want us involved. And I was, and it kind of confused me. And my kind of funny answer initially was, you don't come up. Like, it's actually not about you. Like, it's not, because they kind of took it as it was that we were anti-man. Men started to say to me, you're anti-man. And I'm like, no, we're not at all. like we are trying to create a space where women's voices can be heard. And I often say women are harder on women than men are. Like, we truly do believe that. But we just want to create a space where, I had a post on LinkedIn. It was my most viral LinkedIn post. I put into the video version of ChatGPT, make me a women's event with women celebrating on International Women's Day of different cultures, different backgrounds, And so you scanned the audience in this video, and it was a whole bunch of women, different ages, different races. It was awesome. And then it panned to the stage, and it was a white man on stage. And I was like, well, is that not the funniest thing that ChatGPT could have ever built for me? But that is that's what we're trying to change. Is that the voices on the stage and the voices that we're learning from need to be diverse voices. They need to be women for us, we're focusing on women, but we want women, we want them to be women from different races. We want them to be from different religions. We want them to be from different industries. We want them to be of different ages, because we believe we need to learn from each other. And in order for us to create opportunity for women, men need to also hear our perspectives. And so to me, that's why we need men at the table, because we're not going to create change with a bunch of women in a room if the men are still writing the paychecks on the other side.
I get. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing conversation, learning more about emotional intelligence, learning more about empathy, learning about the strategies to actually build this in as an entrepreneur, right? Managing clients, managing teams, and all of that. And the work you're doing with your partner at AWL Partners. So thank you very much, Mel, for coming on and sharing insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's okay. And for those watching, thank you very much. See you at the next episode.